7 months ago, I was completely overwhelmed and stressed by the entire visa process. And at the time, I just wished there was a resource that laid it all out. So I'm gonna do that for you today. If you're also in the middle of this process, you're welcome in advance. I'm a Canadian who's been living in Paris for the last 6 months, and I'm on a working holiday visa. That's in the long stay visa category, so anything higher than 90 days. My visa is 1 year in length, and it means that I can travel and work here. It says temporarily work to fund your trip, but I am looking for a full-time job. So I think that is a little bit of a gray area, but you can work and travel on this visa. I can list the websites below, but I applied when I was living in Vancouver, BC. There is this main visa website that you go to, and then to actually book the appointment, you go to the VFS Global website. On the VFS website, you have to create an account and then you can apply for the visa. After you apply, you also need to book an appointment. So this is the in-person mandatory appointment where you hand over all your documents. And luckily in Vancouver, they do have a head office that I could do this, but depending on where you live in Canada, you might need to travel to this location to make this appointment. One quick and very random tip for actually booking the appointment: when I was trying to book the long stay working holiday visa time slot to actually meet with a person, no times were coming up. I think a whole day went by and I wasn't seeing any available times. I was on a little bit of a time crunch to apply for my visa, so the next day I called them. I've also since heard that it's a little bit difficult to get a hold of them, but I did, and they told me that instead of trying to go in that category, you have to select any other visa category. That's listed all the way at the bottom under the long stay visa section. For some reason, that was the only way I was able to see the dates and the time slots to actually choose and pick an appointment. I don't know why it's categorized that way. It's also at the very bottom, so why would you think to go to that? That's the only way I was able to book an appointment, so I hope you can find that too. I've broken out this visa process for you in 9 easy to digest steps. After I booked my appointment, there was a page that came up that I screenshot. So that's the same checklist order that I'm going through today, but I do have some recommendations for some that are a little bit higher priority to start with. And at the very end, I have some bonus steps, so stick around for that. First and most important step, this may seem a little bit obvious, but have a valid passport. Double check the expiry date as well. That's very important. Your passport needs to be valid at least 3 months after you arrive in France, but honestly, just renew it as soon as you can so you don't have to deal with it. Step 2, very easy, only requires a printer. Print off the application form that you applied with on the VFS website. Step 3, similar to the last one, make sure you print off the appointment letter. So this is stating the date and time of your appointment, that you're handing in all of your documents. Step 4, you need 2 ID photographs. This is pretty similar to a passport photo. I think the dimensions are slightly different, so if I can find them, I'll put them in the description below. You just need dark clothes on a white background, neutral expression. I just went into the local London Drugs and they printed 2 different dimensions for me because they weren't really sure which dimensions were right. But either way, I gave them both and they're both approved. Step 5, you need a letter of motivation. So why do you want to move to France for the next year? And then you need either return tickets home a year after you get there, or you need a letter of commitment to leave France at the end of your stay. So 2-in-1 letter, if you will. That's what I went with. I just had a letter of motivation, and at the end I said, I will leave France at the end of my stay. Step 6, you need a medical certificate stating your health permits the exercise of professional activity. You can either get this from your family doctor or a walk-in clinic like I did. I did have one that I went to a couple times, so they already had me on file. I asked for a medical certificate for a French visa. They typed it out, they signed it, and emailed it to me that same day after I paid, I think, about a $40 or $50 fee. Step 7, proof of a clean criminal record. If I can flag anything, I'm gonna say start with this step. I had no idea how long this was gonna take, and turns out it could have taken the longest. Luckily, in my case, it actually ended up working out for me, but this one can take a long time. I had never had a criminal record check done before, so I obviously had no idea how long this would take. I went into the Vancouver Police Department, I did my fingerprints, and for some reason, I thought a few days later I would go in and pick up a document that said, yep, you're good. Actually, they have to mail it to you, and obviously not knowing how long Canada Post can take and how long their database is gonna take, they give you about a 2 to 4 week timeline. The day that I went into VPD, I had exactly 1 week before my appointment where I needed to hand over all these documents. And if I didn't get it in time, I would have to move my appointment, I would have to move my flight, and I was stressing. But luckily, I ended up getting my criminal record check in the mail, I think 1 or 2 days before my actual appointment. So I didn't have to move anything, and I was really, really lucky. So start with this step and save yourself a lot of stress. Step 8, you need medical insurance covering the entire length of your stay. For the working holiday visa, that's a year. I went with this company that's called Tugo, Tugo. I can add a link at the bottom in case you want to check that one out, but there's tons of different options for where to get insurance. You could go with your bank or your credit card company if they have that. And for the appointment, you basically just print off the receipt showing that you paid for this insurance. Last and final step 9, you need proof of funds of at least 2,500 euros in your bank account. At the time of this video, that's about $3,700 Canadian. You can print off your bank statement, I think, or in my case, I didn't have a printer, so I went into my bank, they printed it for me and stamped a little certified date stamp on it, and that's what I used. It worked for me, but I don't know, maybe you can just print off your own bank statement. Now we're getting into the bonus tips. This sounds fun, but it's basically just to give you an overarching picture of what the actual appointment will look like. I showed up early for my appointment, and that's when I learned you're not allowed to use phones in the waiting area. There's posters on the wall. They also say don't use your phone. So I'm a bit of a rule follower, and I didn't use my phone because I didn't want it to jeopardize my visa. But I wish I knew ahead of time because I would have brought a book or something to do, because my appointment came and went and I was still sitting there, I think over an hour later. There was about 4 or 5 people sitting at the tills at the front, at least in the Vancouver location. So obviously they can get backed up with different people and needing different documents. So I was there for a really long time, just sitting, shuffling through my paperwork, looking for things to do. When my name was finally called, I went up to the booth, I sat down, everybody's still behind you, you're not in a private area, and you're giving this person all of your personal information, which seems a little bit weird to me, but just so you know. Then they would ask for the document one by one in the list that I just gave you, and I would hand over the documents one at a time, and eventually we got to the end and he said, "Thank you, you can go sit down." So I rejoined my little group at the back, and a little while later I got called up again. This is finally when I went into a private room. They took my fingerprints and they took my photos, and not that it matters at all, but just so you know, the photos they take there are the ones that actually end up being on your visa in your passport. Not the 2 ID photos that I mentioned earlier. Maybe those are just to check your identity, but if you want to do your hair and your makeup that day, those are the ones that end up being in your passport. After that, I got to sit down one more time in the waiting area. They said, "We're going to check to make sure we have everything for you, and then when we call your name again, you're allowed to leave." So that was the whole experience in a nutshell. I just wish I knew ahead of time what it was gonna look like, so hopefully this helps you. The following day, I got a notification saying that my passport had arrived in Montreal, where they were reviewing all the documents, and they did say that this process could take up to 4 weeks or longer. I had exactly a month after my appointment until my flight was booked, so again, that was another worry of mine. I miraculously lucked out again, and I ended up receiving my passport back about a week later in the mail. So you never know how long it's going to take. They say it could take a long time because maybe a lot of people are applying at once, and I just ended up getting mine pretty quickly, so I didn't have to change my flights. I hope this has been useful to you, and it gives you a little bit of peace of mind that you just need to come up with a checklist and check things off. Obviously, some things are a little bit easier to do, like printing off forms, and some, like the criminal record check, can take weeks. So give yourself about 1 to 2 months to get all this stuff sorted so you can save yourself a headache and a lot of stress. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to follow along in my journey here living in Paris. And if you have any questions about the visa process or what it's like living here, let me know and I'll either reply below or I'll make another video like this. I'll see you in the next one.